Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lauren, and on this channel I talk about healing chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, other chronic illnesses and symptoms by healing old trauma, specifically attachment trauma, and even more specifically, neglect trauma. Neglect wounds, those are the wounds that, in my experience, seem to be the ones that show up in the physical body as these illnesses. So there's sort of a metaphor that you can make there where these invisible wounds turn into these invisible illnesses that nobody else can see. And everybody else says, well, you look fine. You seem fine. You're okay. Maybe you need this, maybe you need that. Nobody else can see the depth of the misery that you're experiencing when you have one of these illnesses. And it activates that same trauma of having wounds that nobody else can see. Emotional neglect wounds nobody else can see. They're very difficult to see, and they're most difficult for us to see. And so it can take time to just identify what are the things that I needed to happen that didn't happen. It's much harder to identify the things that didn't happen than the things that did, because we all have explicit memories of, well, assuming you have access to the memories, you will have memories of things that happened. But how do you access memories of what didn't happen? It takes more time. It takes a lot of learning about attachment needs. And a lot of times it requires seeing in the external world with your own eyes, or just having somebody else say, and then realizing, have that sort of aha click moment where it's like, oh my God, you're supposed to have that? People have that, but then, of course, there can also be this, like, I knew that, but there wasn't that connection of me in that. There was a disconnect there, and so it takes some time and conscious work to find those holes, those places where something was supposed to fill this, and it didn't. Nobody did. Today, I wanna update you guys a little bit about what I'm going through because I have insights about it that I hope are helpful. So I'm in a place reminding me of all these truths about this process of healing trauma. Right now, or in all of July, I've been going through a very intense, very tumultuous, just internally and externally tumultuous circumstances that are a result of the years of trauma work that I have done. And what I mean by that is so much of trauma work is internal, is all that work that we do inside by ourselves on our own, or with a coach or a therapist, or, with a safe other. But for so long, there's this cocooning period. There's a place that we all have to go to, most of us at least, and those of us who develop chronic fatigue, all of us who develop chronic fatigue or some fatigue illness, that brings us to a place of more isolation, more solitude, to quiet the external so that we can go internal and go deep internal and stay there for a while. This cocooning phase that it's so, so important to be able to shut off, because when you have attachment trauma, the outside world is so loud. It is so, and what I mean by loud is activating, triggering, interacting with the external. It can be so triggering when you have attachment trauma. The trauma can be triggered anywhere and everywhere. Now, it's not everywhere for all of us, but it can feel like everywhere, and it's specific things for each specific person, how that's going to manifest. And that helps you identify what your specific wounds are, where your specific painful places are that need to be processed and released and seen. Seen is the big operative word. Once things are seen, they immediately start to die. They immediately lose control. So seen is the big operative word, that the seen and felt and held, embraced, and moved through. So when we have attachment trauma, these things can show up everywhere. And so when we develop chronic fatigue, as you know, if you have it, or any fatigue illness, the world shrinks, 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 shrinks over time. If you've been on this journey for a time, there's this experience of it keeps shrinking. until it gets to this very insular period where it has to become all your internal world. Your life becomes about your internal world, your internal experience. And that is a beautiful thing. If you zoom out and see it from a zoomed out position, that is a gorgeous thing that happens to us in this process. However, the experience of that can be incredibly painful because being in an isolated place can bring you back to your childhood, back to that painful place, that internal experience of being a child where you had places where you weren't getting your needs met and you were alone. That experience of being alone is pervasive, it's universal in attachment trauma, from what I can see. So, being in that insular period, that isolated, more secluded period, can be painful, but it can also be comforting and peaceful, more peaceful because you don't have all that noise. It also does depend on if you have more anxious attachment or avoidant attachment, if you're familiar, or more disorganized. And a lot of us with attachment trauma have disorganized or anxious avoidant, or whatever the term you prefer is. Those are never permanent. Those are never a permanent type of attachment that you will have the rest of your life. That's just the impact. That's how trauma has impacted you, and it will change. It will become more and more secure the more you heal. So this period of solitude is so, so important. Just like when a butterfly is going from a caterpillar to a butterfly, it can't skip the cocoon phase. Like when it's in a caterpillar phase, it's with all the other little caterpillars. This is silly. And same with butterfly, but when it's in a cocoon, it's alone. And only it is in there. And it has to face this giant thing. And it has no idea how that's going to happen. It has no idea what it's going to feel like, what it's going to experience. I'm anthropomorphizing, clearly, but it's going through that experience of it doesn't know if it's going to be a butterfly. It doesn't know what's going to happen. It's alone, is my point. And it has to go through that period alone. Well, that's what a lot of us in the chronic fatigue period of trauma healing, and I do believe that that's a period. If you have chronic fatigue, that's just a period of your overarching, the larger trauma healing journey. That's the cocoon phase. When you're exhausted, when you're depleted, it is your body and the universe's message of saying, quiet it all down. It's just you and me. It's just you and me. It is you, your inner child, and the universe in this cocoon together. And yes, you have communication with the external world, but if you're in it, that this is the reality, that this really is how it is. It's you. It's just you and the universe. And the universe is what will heal you. We don't have control over how this healing process goes. We cannot plan, we cannot control when things heal. This has been proven to me so many times I can't even count. You can see something months in advance of it healing. If it doesn't hit in a certain way, it has to hit in a particular way and of just the right moment when it's ready to heal. Our bodies or the universe is what is the actual healing magic that happens. All we can do is create the container, the presence, the love container, the acceptance container. We are both in the feminine role of flowing with whatever comes at any given moment, and we're also in a masculine role of creating the container. I see you, and I know you. I know the beauty that is within you, and I hold you, I have you while you feel all this horrible stuff, while you feel this horrific pain. I'm with you and I have you. So to play both of those roles is the healing process. We have to have both the masculine and the feminine. The feminine is usually what we have the most trouble with, but in this context, the masculine, that container can be really difficult. But the feminine is really difficult too if there's this fight energy of gripping, like I have to control this. I am the one that's going to heal myself. Me. I'm going to do it. No, that's not how it works. But when we have attachment trauma, that grip, that need, that desperate need to feel in control of our life is really amplified, and we hold on to it so tight. This is something that has come so many times. It has been such a repetitive lesson that I've had to learn over and over and over again, that we cannot control. We don't have control over our healing. We can only make the space. The universe will dictate. You can refer to it as your body or the universe or God, however you want to refer to it as. That is what really does the healing. The magic has the power to heal you. We only have the power to bring presence and learn how to bring love, compassion, and presence. That's the learning arc. How to bring that to these emotions and these parts of us that we never wanted to see, because they felt so dangerous to see. This container, this cocoon phase, is so, so powerful. This is when the learning, the incredible learning arc happens. It's the hard learning of what does it really take, and your body will respond and give you the feedback. If it's not moving, we're trying to control it. We're gripping on to the outcome. I need this to work. I need this to happen. If I'm doing it right, then it should be working, but it's not. And so I'm not be doing it wrong. And then it goes into the defective wound. There's a need for a relinquish of control. That is a huge art to learn in this healing process. The art of surrender, the art of trust. Trust is the thing that we are learning in attachment trauma, because trust is what was broken. The trust with ourself is what was broken, because the trust was broken with our significant caregivers, our attachment figures, our most significant attachment figures. Trust was broken there. And so we never learned how to trust ourselves. The trust was broken with ourselves. That's the trust that we have to rebuild. And that happens through time and consistency and rewiring. Every time that emotion that was so terrifying to feel and express, so threatening, comes up, we step towards it. Whatever we can do to lean into it, to look at it, to see something in there, to lean towards it, to embrace it as much as we can through somatic work, through conscious work, through spiritual work, whatever work we need to do in that moment, to turn towards it and look at it and just try to see more and open up the veil and just open up the presence for it to reveal itself. And a lot of times when that happens, we get confirmation with our body. Our body either lightens or our body releases. But that's what this cocoon phase is. This gigantic learning process. And I don't say gigantic to be intimidating. I say gigantic to be validating, because if you're in it, you know that it is. There's so much to learn here. How do I love myself unconditionally? How do I connect to myself with deep love, compassion, embrace, acceptance, all the things that I needed, validation, mirroring, value, interest, all the things, importance, how do I actually do it? It's not enough to know, we all know this, it's not enough to know intellectually. How do I actually do that? That's the learning of this cocoon phase. Now, this cocoon phase, I can't remember if I said it on this channel, but I heard this metaphor for the healing process years and years ago, and it really stuck with me. And it re-entered my mind this spring as bamboo in our backyard started to grow, these two shoots that were not there one week and then were very tall a few weeks later. And I was reminded of this metaphor, which is the healing process is like bamboo. Bamboo is unique. It's a unique plant because of its growth pattern. It spends years putting in roots in the ground, this incredible root system, and it grows deep into the ground, years. So much so that by the time it starts to surface, it starts shooting up. it has so much growth capacity and growth potential that it's created in all those years underground where you couldn't see anything that was happening. Nobody else could see the changes. Nothing else external seemed to be reflecting what was happening internal. This is the metaphor for healing. When we're in this cocoon phase, it's like that, those years when we're building the root system, all the root systems. And at some point, it's going to start coming out of the ground and the external is going to start mirroring the internal. Now, we get reflections from the external in the healing process. I'm not saying that. But my point is when you see something happening on the outside, a decision, a major decision that you make about your life, or something huge that happens external to you that's never happened before, that you're going into a realm that you never could have imagined you going in, that was complete no to your inner child, to your childhood programming, like never do. Those are just examples, but there's in some way, this can be relationship shifts. It can be home environment shifts. It can be job shifts. It can be huge reordering in our lives. When those things happen, I just want to validate for you, remember the bamboo, because what that means is you have done a tremendous amount underneath, in the internal, in the underground. In order for something to be showing up in the external, so much has to have happened underground. So much happened. So I've been very much aware of this in this last month because a major transition that I've needed to make for a long time, that I kept just coming up against: wound, grief, gotta grieve this. I can't seem to make this move. I can't seem to take this step. I can't, I, I know that I need it, but I can't take it. There's something that's pulling me. And there was like a very internal, torturous experience for a long time where I could not take this step that I had to. And the wounds were keeping me in that space. It wasn't happening until it was ready to happen. It was never going to happen until it was going to happen. And my will was not controlling it, because one thing I've learned, one thing I have promised myself, I will do everything I can in my life now to never make a major decision out of fear or out of trauma. And so I refused to take this step until I could see without any wounds what the right thing for me was. Now, I could make an argument that it was the wounds that was doing the opposite and keeping me in the situation. I'm sorry I can't give more detail about what the situation is, but the most important part is just that the wounds I couldn't see. I just couldn't see. I thought I could see, but I couldn't see, and I didn't want it to be. And then I wanted it to be one way, and I kept hoping that the healing of the wounds would make one result. That's what I wanted. My egoic want, my egoic desire wanted that to be true. But what ended up happening was, as I worked through the wounds, it became more and more clear that the wounds actually were the thing that were keeping me in that situation and keeping me from leaving. And I was not able to take the step. But in June, I got to a place where that healing cycle was complete enough, and I couldn't unsee what I saw anymore. Now, there had been a long period of that phenomenon happening over and over again, to keep seeing things that I couldn't unsee as I healed wounds. Healing wounds is always a good thing. It gets us closer and closer to ourselves, but it can also result in a lot of pain. To realize something about your life, there can be many realizations about life that can come from trauma healing that need to be grieved. And the grieving has been great, as in immense. During this time, just kept grieving. Lots of other emotions in there too. This whole experience has been an experience of forcing that process I couldn't not face these emotions. If I didn't, I would have gone into a deep depression. And I promised myself many years ago that I will do whatever it takes to never go into that dark place again. And that means look every emotion in the face without exception. Look at everything. You have to see everything. This process takes a lot of grit, and you know that because you're on it. And obviously I'm in here with you. I feel so grateful that I've gotten to a place where I can now always find the ground, even in the deepest, darkest of moments, that I can always feel the ground. And that was not always true. That was actually never true until more recent times. And so that's one of the goals in my mind, is to be able to always find the ground. So now what's happening is lots of external changes because of my choices, my taking action, actions that created such terror, old terror, old terror, so much fear and terror. Making that decision, taking that step required so much. And so to get to a place where you make a decision like that, I keep reminding myself, because we have to learn how to self-validate in this process, because wherever there are emotions not moving, it's because we haven't learned how to self-validate, because we weren't validated as kids in that arena. So I'm reminding myself that it speaks to the volume of processing that happened that was all internal. I'm telling you all this because when you're in the cocoon, when you're in the, and I hopefully I've already expressed this clearly, but when you're in that, it doesn't feel like things are moving. That's sort of my point. Sometimes it feels like things are not really changing and moving. I feel like I'm doing all this work all the time, and my life isn't really changing. My internal experience is changing, but my external life isn't changing. I mean, it depends if you want it to change or not. But a lot of us who have enough trauma to turn into chronic fatigue have lived lives where the decisions in our lives have been dictated by, or, influenced at least, but really dictated by usually the trauma. And so those don't always align with what our true nature is and what our true self needs and want, and just align with your true self. Those decisions are not always aligned. So then that's a grieving process on its own, to grieve the decisions and the things that we've lost out on or missed out on, grieving the loss of the life that we didn't have, that we see the potential that we could have, that we see idealized as one that would be more aligned. Now, the truth is, this life is exactly the most aligned one that you could be living, because it's leading you to this place of healing. And that is part of your great, in my view, great, mission in life, one of our amazing purposes in life, to do this work when we're called to do so. And I believe people who develop chronic fatigue are ones called to do this work. So again, to validate that when you see it on the external, that means how much you've done, because when you're in it, when you're in the cocoon, it just feels like things aren't moving, and I can't move. I can't make this change. And it could be like all the external things. I can't shift my finances. I can't shift my relationship. I can't shift my family life. I can't shift my friendships. They're not changing. They're not moving. And I can't move. I can't break this off, or I can't make this major decision or job or whatever it is that is a part of your life that it's just like this frustrating, repetitive, this thing that happens over and over and over again, like a toxic dynamic, or just the things that happen over and over again. It starts to feel like the universe is playing like mind games with you and like torturing you by putting you in this circumstance over and over again. But it's because it's trying to help you heal by putting it in front of you over and over and over again, encouraging you to face whatever that is coming from and triggering. So when you feel like, when you're conscious of something that you want to shift and you have never been able to shift, and you're doing all this healing work and it's not changing on the external, it's so frustrating. But this is why I'm sharing this video today, because it takes a while to build all that scaffolding and heal all the parts and the tendrils of these core wounds have like these kind of tendrils coming out of them, and they come in these different lenses and versions. And I'm not saying you have to heal everything for things to change on the external. That's not what I'm saying at all, because that's not true. But there are certain things that are holding those karmic ties or whatever it is to you. And so for things to shift on the external, there is a lot of internal cocooning that has to take place, a lot of internal work that has to take place before it happens on the external. And so when you see it happening on the external, just validate yourself to realize, dang, this really, I'm like, just let yourself really see and feel wonderful, like in awe of yourself, of what you have healed and the immense work that you have done. So that's my message for today. I hope you're doing well in your cocoon, or maybe things are happening in your external. And I know based on the astrology of these current times, so much is shifting and we are in a period of reordering. I mean, we all know that in our, political, socioeconomic structure system, that there is grand reordering happening in our lives, but that is happening in the personal too. And we are seeing, again, great reordering. And so just remember, when you witness reordering in your external circumstances, and that can mean a big crumbling. Yes, it can. I'm in the rubble at the moment. The crumble, the crumbs. And it can mean, like the Tower card in the tarot, it's when the big structure falls. That's going to be what happens first as the reorder happens. You have to have the fall before this new structure comes in. Another way to say all of this is death and rebirth. Trauma healing is a series of deaths and rebirths. This is like the Plutonian cycle and experience of ego. I don't like using the word ego very much, but in spiritual communities, they talk about ego deaths. How I would say it is the dying of old patterns, of old beliefs that were rooted in wounds. Those are what's dying. And then a new structure, a new healed entity is entering that space. So I hope it's helpful. If you found this helpful, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and you like my content. And if you think this might be helpful to somebody else, go ahead and share it with them. That would be wonderful to help the channel grow and get this message out there of how to heal, what it really is to heal. There are so many people on this planet in healing journeys of some kind. So we all need to just support each other and be in community while we do it. All healing is a solitary experience in many ways, and yet we need community to do it. We need the validation and the community of others, especially in the hardest moments. To follow through with my metaphor, a bunch of cocooning caterpillars in the process of dissolving and turning into butterflies, all in a group together, hanging on a tree together, all in a group, a community nearby. We're all doing it in solitude, but we're doing it together as well. That's cute. I hope you're doing well. If you would like one-on-one support, I am always here. You can contact me through my website, laurenvoorhees.com. You can also email me. The email address is down below in the description, as well as my website, and you can book a free session for an initial consult, a discovery call for 30 minutes. I would love to work with you. I'd love to support you during your journey. So if you would like one-on-one support, I am here. I hope you're doing well. I hope that these crazy 2024 energies are serving you well. It's all divine, whether it feels terrible or wonderful. It is all for higher purpose. So I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you on the next one. Bye.